Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our vegetable garden. We've got a very blustery day here in Spokane, Washington, but I'm going to make the best of it. We are in hardiness zone 5B to 6A, and I thought for this week's video I would give you an update on how the early part of the vegetable garden is coming along, and I'm also going to show you how the seedlings that I started indoors are doing as well. You'll recall I did a recent video on how to grow carrots. And you can see these teeny tiny little seedlings, so they're coming up very nicely, except in this row, these are rainbow carrots, and I've got a few little gaps here and there, but you just never know, they might still be coming up. The parsnips are not up yet, they're in the far row, and I seem to recall that they're kind of slow about that, so I'm not panicking that I don't see any seedlings just yet. Now you probably noticed that I've got hoops and floating row cover over this bed. It's not to keep any insects away, but it is to keep the quail in our garden away, because they would eat these tender little seedlings in nothing flat. As a matter of fact, let me show you an example of what they do to plants. This is a kale plant, or at least it was, and this is a perfect example of why I do need to protect young seedlings from the quail. Now this plant and one other were left over from our winter garden, and I didn't have anywhere I was going to plant them, and they were kind of on their way out anyway. But I thought, well, let's see what happens. And yeah, that's what happened. Now back to the carrots. As I mentioned in my carrot video, what I'm going to do is let the seedlings get to be about 2 to 3 inches tall, and then I will thin them so they are 3 inches apart. They really need that spacing in order to develop a nice big root. Right next to the carrot bed is the garlic bed, and you can see that the plants are doing great. We really don't need to do anything to them for quite a while, so we're just going to let them grow and occasionally give them a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer. On the other side of the carrot bed, you'll recall that we're growing potatoes in cloth grow bags. The grow bags are about 15 gallons each, and so far the potatoes have just sent up tiny sprouts, but let's take a look at one of them. Can you see this teeny tiny little sprout? Yep, that's a potato. And the routine is that we'll let the foliage get up a few inches, and then we'll put more soil into the cloth grow bag, let them grow again, put more soil in, and so on. This is the only bed in our middle row that has anything growing in it yet. What you're looking at in the foreground is red Russian kale, and you'll also see some on the far right. And then there's a few lettuce plants. That is Batavian full heart lettuce, and I had it left over from our winter garden. It's growing so well, I thought I'm just going to keep growing it and harvesting it. But the reason this bed has floating row cover over it is because kale is a member of the cabbage family, and because of that, they're very susceptible to aphids and cabbage worms. So by having floating row cover over the bed 24/7, I will not have problems with either of those types of insects. It is such an easy solution. I also want to add that I started those kale plants using the winter sowing method, so that's pretty cool. This bed also has floating row cover over it, and in it Bill is growing pak choi and all kinds of different radishes. And again, that floating row cover is to keep certain types of damaging insects away. Now, if you saw my video on growing broccoli a couple of weeks ago, you know what my method is. But I just want to explain that the bed is covered with agricultural insect netting, which is a very fine, durable netting that I got from gardenport.com. And it keeps away the aphids and cabbage worms. You'll also notice at the bottom of the plants there are copper rings. And in that video I explain how we made them and how they keep slugs away from the plants, because slugs love cabbage family crops. But the thing is that their skin reacts electrically with copper. And this is a method we have used for years, and boy does it work well. So let's take a little peek under the cover. Now you can see the plants. And if you notice how there's some floating row cover on the outside of the agricultural insect netting, we have had a few really hard frosts lately, and of course I panic about my little plant babies, and so I have been using a frost blanket on it for a few of the nights. but I think we're at the point where I don't need to worry about that anymore. Phew. So here's another bed that is covered with agricultural insect netting, and this is one of our hinged raised bed covers. Let's take a look inside. This is the bed where I planted 1 row of Swiss chard and 2 rows of beets, and boy did those seeds germinate nicely. Now, once the plants are a few inches tall, I really need to thin them. And with the Swiss chard, I'm going to thin the plants about 6 inches apart, and I will thin the beets to 3 to 4 inches apart. And that way everything has enough room to grow. And it has a cover on it because as members of the beet family, which is beets, spinach, and Swiss chard, they are very susceptible to leaf miners, which are a super damaging insect. And here's another bed with a cover over it. Let's see what's inside there. This is my lettuce bed. In it, I'm growing bower lettuce, and then Bill snuck a few pak choys in here, the nerve. But I have to tell you, this is my 2nd year of growing bower lettuce. It is so prolific and it makes fabulous salads, so I heartily recommend it. The seeds are quite easy to find. And I actually just did a bunch of harvesting yesterday, so the plants are even smaller than they were. But they will get to be a really nice size. This is our gutter pea bed, and I have to be completely honest with you. It is not growing well this year. And I don't know if it's because it has just been so incredibly cold. I mean, they're a cool season crop, so they should be doing all right. But I also wanted to point out that I did not have time to shoot a video on planting it. Normally I do. I apologize for that. I just plain ran out of time one day. You'll notice that we've got pruned apple branches as the supports for it, which has always worked really well for us, and hey, it's free. And then in case you're wondering why there is floating row cover around it, well, I showed you what the quail did to the kale plant, right? So it's to keep them away until the peas are maybe about a foot tall, and then we should be okay. But I'm hoping these plants will perk up very soon. Yep, here's another bed with floating row cover on it, and it's because of the quail. So this is our fava bean bed. It is doing really well so far, and I think in about 2 weeks I can ditch the floating row cover because the plants will be large enough to fend for themselves. The things I have to do to get some plants started around here. And this is going to be a little hard to see, but this last bed has a gazillion onions planted in it. These are ones that Bill started from seed using the winter sowing method. We both love onions for all different kinds of cooking, and so we always grow a lot, and yet it never seems to be enough. But they're coming along well so far. You'll also notice the bed has floating row cover on it, and yep, it's because of the quail. In a few weeks, we'll be able to take it off for the rest of the season. So here in our little greenhouse, I have the rest of my winter-sown seedlings. This is a delphinium called Pacific Giant. Here is Lucky Lips snapdragons. Then I have Pixie lupins, Cupcakes Cosmos, another type of a lupin called Russell, and more snapdragons. This one is the orange bicolor that I grew last year. Now, I promised you a peek at the seedlings that I started indoors a couple of months ago. I've got all kinds of different things: tomatoes, coleus, begonias, eggplants, salpiglossus or painted tongue, marigolds, Rudbeckia Sahara mix, a little bit of everything. And today is a momentous day because I'm starting the hardening off process for them, knowing that I'll get to plant them in the next couple of weeks. If you haven't seen any of my videos about hardening off, it is a process of slowly acclimating them to the intensity of the sunlight outdoors, because no matter how good your planting lights are indoors, it is nowhere near as intense as actual sunlight. So this is the plant's first day, and they're just outside for an hour, and then I'm going to move them back inside. And also I should mention that they are in very filtered sunlight for today, tomorrow, and the next day. So first day, 1 hour, move them back indoors. Second day, they get to be outside for 2 hours, then move them back indoors. Third day, 3 hours, and so on. And over the course of 1 week, once you hit about 3 days of them being outdoors, you want to start moving them out to more and more direct sunlight. This is an important step that you do not want to miss, because if you let them get badly sunburned in your garden by planting them directly from indoors to out in the garden, it will set the plants back significantly and can also even kill the plants. So you don't want to forget to do that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little tour of our garden and also of how the seedlings are doing. And I plan to do a garden update once a month through the season, so you can see how things progress. I'll always have tips to share with you. Now next week I'll get back to a more focused type of a video. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. Happy gardening.